no. That was clickbait. I'm sorry. I would never take a hammer to my projects. I just want to get my point across that today we're going to be breaking down a couple miniature projects. A few videos ago, I worked on some unfinished projects where I worked on the exteriors and just completed the project all around. In contrast, today I'm going to be taking some finished projects and breaking them down. Stormy's here too, guys. Stormy's here too. Can I finish the intro? Please. I've gotten the question a few times. What do you do with all your projects when you finish them? There's a few things. I will give them away, or donate them, or gut them out and use them for something else, or display them. And displaying is one of the things I'm having a hard time with this project specifically. This project is huge, as you can tell, and it's a little bit difficult to get a case for. I don't really have a spot to display it, so I am going to break it down because currently it's just a dust catcher. This project is pretty easy to display, but for some reason it's just not sparking joy, I guess Marie Kondo would say. When I look at it, there's just something off about it to me. I think maybe my little character is a bit too big, or it could be that the background looks really realistic and my character just doesn't. So something about it is just not right to me. So very respectfully and without a hammer, I am going to be breaking these projects down today. And hopefully, if you are sitting there with a project that you're not quite in love with or you don't know what to do with, this will give you a bit of permission to say it's okay to let go of things. It's okay to move on. Both of these projects I learned so much from, and that knowledge is never going to go away. So it's not going to be a huge loss for me not to have the physical projects anymore. So let's get started on breaking these down. Here's one final look at the elbow brush bake-off project. I will put a link to this project down below if you want to see the original video. I'm also showing you how much dust it has collected over the years of being put up on a high shelf and not being able to be viewed. So there are a lot of little pieces here, which is one thing that makes it incredibly hard to dust, and it's just huge. So I am going to start by cleaning it. I recently contacted my original collab partner on this project and asked if she would be interested in the small cakes. I can't see myself using them again in the future. They were very specifically for this project, and I thought it would be something she'd be interested in. She said yes, so I'm going to make sure I get those dusted, cleaned up, and saved for her. Everything else, I'm just getting the top layer of dust on before I start carefully removing things from the platform. For some reason in this project, I decided to glue everything down. I typically don't do that, or I put off gluing things down, but I didn't in this case. So here's a bit of that process. I think it's about to come free. Okay. Well, that one came free too. All right, we got an entire table, sink, and everything on it off. Couple things glued to the floor. Okay. Okay, well, it's off. Did a little bit more damage there than I wanted to, but that one was glued pretty good. I am trying my best to save this floor because I remember spending a lot of time on it. I really do like the platform itself, so if I can save it, I am going to, but as you can see, there's quite a bit of damage that's going into it so far, and I still have more to remove, especially these 3 giant stoves. The clean one is going to be a little easier to get off, but the one with all of the cake splatter, that may be a bit more difficult. So let's start with the clean one. I thought using flush cutters here was going to be the answer, but it was really just squishing the mat board. So I went back to my craft knife and just started, well, this one was already kind of loose, but just started trying to cut through the glue that was underneath each foot. This one came off fairly easy. The next one, not so much because of that big glob that is a combination of sand, paint, and glue. It worked really well to look like exploded cake batter, and apparently it works really well as glue. Okay, I think it's free. We took a chunk of the floor, but it's free. Last piece of furniture. I think I can cut it free from this blob, but we'll give it a go. Come on. There we go. Oh, it's still stuck. Feet might need a little TLC in the future, but it's free. I was so happy to get those pieces off without having to rip off any legs. It left me with quite a horrifying sight, which was the cake explosion that I originally made for this project. And as you can see, I have a lot of that cake batter mixture to fight with, and it's going to be interesting to try and remove it from the floor, especially since there's a few bits around. The best thing I could find for this was the flush cutters, but they kind of make an awful sound and it was really slow going. I'm trying to decide if this is worth it or if it would be easier to just cut out that section of the floor and rebuild it. It wouldn't be very much. I'm gonna have to repair the floor anyway and repaint it, so might as well. Before I started tearing up the floor, I decided to remove the wood structure that held the sign up above. This came off in one complete piece, so I set it off to the side after taking off the banner. Thankfully, I had printed this on some printable like vinyl type stuff, or it was like a canvas, so it didn't rip like paper would have. I was going to attempt to remove this little electrical box in the most graceful way possible, but it was very, very glued on. And I knew this wallpaper wasn't going to last either, so I decided to start tearing at the wallpaper, and eventually I was able to get it to kind of release and help me get the electrical box off. And this is what happens when you don't seal your chalk pastel. Just so you know, I guess I did not do that step because it ended up all over my hands. I then continued my work with the flush cutter tool and cut away at the little bits of cake batter on the wall. I want to at least get it to be flat. I then used my craft blade to cut a wood paneling type cut through the floor, and I want it to be just around the area that has the cake batter. There was no way I was going to get that as flat as I wanted it to be, so I just pulled up the entire section of flooring. I could tell it was just made from chipboard. I have chipboard and it's cut at a 1/2 inch thickness, so hopefully it will be pretty easy to replace. For this, I'm going to be using some cereal box material. I'm sanding one side so that it sticks really well, whether it sticks to the glue or the paint. And my paper cutter made it pretty easy to cut it into 1/2 inch strips that I could then custom put into my project. This was a bit of a slow process to make sure everything matched, but it really didn't take too long because there wasn't much to replace. I added 1, 2, 3 blocks on top to make sure it dried flat. And then I used some sandpaper to go over any of the areas that got ripped up by glue. I know this looks like I've made an absolute mess, and I have. And this is the moment where you think, did I make a mistake? But I don't think I did. This is the part where I get to turn it into something completely new. Fingers crossed. I'm sure you can all guess what paint color I am going with for this new floor. That is right, it is brown. I want a brown wood floor, which is probably what I wanted to paint it in the first place. but I went with a beige to match the wallpaper and the overall design of the project. I sanded again any of the areas that I felt were a bit rough from the glue or the areas where I pulled things off, and then added another coat of paint. There were a couple spots on the floor that bubbled up from the moisture in the paint, and off camera I fixed them, but basically all I did was cut a line with my craft knife, pull up those floorboards in that area. I added some glue underneath the floorboards and then pressed them back down in place. And then I did take a piece of wax paper to put on top and added my 1, 2, 3 blocks. So I had to do this in 2 different areas so that the floor laid completely flat by the time it was done. I couldn't help myself but to add some streaks of other colors of paint, so I added a bit of the light tan color over the wood and then sanded it. This kind of helped blend it all in. There's something about the texture of this floor specifically that's kind of bumpy, but that's okay. To finally protect everything and blend all of the panels of wood together, I'm going to cover everything in a coat of matte Mod Podge, and then I am going to put this to the side and let it dry. And while it's drying, I have something very different to take apart. So I'm going to let you watch that process for a second, and then I'll chime back in. As I'm sure you can tell, not everything came off cleanly. It left a lot of marks in the paint, it left some glue spots, and if I am going to use this table again, it's going to need a very good sanding, but I wanted to prove to myself that was possible, so I did a bit of sanding on one side, and it does look like it would be savable with a bit of paint, and it could be a totally new table. I was also thinking it could be cut in half at some point if it was like an interesting shaped kitchen, but the whole table couldn't fit, then that's another option. So many things that could be done with this. So now that those are all removed, I need to find something to do with all of these tiny miniatures. Now I do want to remember this project. I really enjoyed this project. So I pulled out my favorite stove and I am just going to add all of these miniatures onto this one stove. It is going to look like a complete mess of ingredients, bowls, sloppy bits of cake batter, and that is exactly what I want. That is the part that I had the most fun with this project, and now I can have just a little piece of it sitting on my shelf so that I can enjoy it each day. I really enjoyed sitting down and making this new collection of miniatures because everything was already made and I just glued it in place and it was so fun. I enjoyed this so much. And I really do highly suggest this process, that if you do have to get rid of a project for some reason, it's too big, but you want to remember the project itself and maybe even your favorite parts, make a small little vignette or take a piece of it that was really meaningful and just make a small little dome or something that has a piece of it that brings you back those memories. So now I'm going to cover up this wallpaper, which makes me sad because I do like this wallpaper. I think it's really fun, but I plan to make this into a photo backdrop for my miniatures. So the first thing I need to do is cover it all up. I'm using a large piece of poster board and a lot of glue that I'm spreading thin and flat to cover up the wallpaper. This is going to be a lot easier than trying to sand the wallpaper off the back of this piece. Before I show you what my final backdrop turned out like, I wanted to talk about my different categories of where these miniatures are going to go. This first category are things that are going to be put away into my collection. I definitely want to keep this table. It's such an interesting table. I think it'd be fun to try and figure out a different project it could go into. I have some wood scraps and just a few leftover miniatures. I realized I don't really need to keep these stoves in my collection because they're my kits and I can always rebuild them if I need them for a future project. It would just take up storage space, and maybe someone else would be really interested in a really messy stove that could spark an idea of their own. So these are going to go in my store when it opens back up on May 1st. There is a very clean one with teal pots and pans, and then there is a very messy one with black pots and pans. This is going to be my keepsake stove that reminds me of the project and actually lets me put this on display. I ordered a display case for it. I hope it comes in before the end of this video, but I cannot wait to put it on my shelves. And finally, these items are going to my collab partner, Kate. I'm going to turn the little banner into a bookmark for her. So what's kind of exciting about this is now that I have taken this project apart, it went from being never seen because it was just really difficult to display to being displayed in multiple different ways and possibly being reused in the future. Definitely being reused in the future. So I'm going to get all of this put in the correct areas, packaged up, and then we can move on to the second project, which is going to be a bit different. Boop. Thankfully, because I recently worked on my miniature organization, I have the perfect place for this table. Well, I say perfect, but the table is really large, so I had to move a few things around, but this is my shelves and tables bin. But whenever I start working on a project and I think, oh, that kitchen table type thing might be perfect for this, I know exactly where to get it. I also need to store the leftover little miniatures that I didn't end up putting on my keepsake stove, so I'm putting those in my sorting bin, which we'll put in my other ones later. And this wood piece is going to go straight into my wood collection. I'm leaving it put together because you never know when you might need a little structure. I'm taking those 2 extra stoves over to my store so I remember to list them. I'm putting my keepsake stove over to the side so I don't accidentally knock it off the table. And then I'm going to work on the gift that I'm sending to Kate. The banner by itself would probably make a pretty good bookmark, but there are a few like rough pieces on the back from the glue, so I decided to glue it down to a piece of paper. This makes it just look a little bit nicer in my opinion. And then because I'm adding it onto a piece of paper, I can glue the team pieces. And this one did have a little bit of that cake batter stuff on it because, you know, the cake batter just went everywhere. So I cut that off and now it does look like someone took a little bite out of this piece. But I glued those onto the back of the bookmark and then I wrote, "Oops, cake explosion" on one side and then signed the bottom of the bookmark. She doesn't have to use this or keep it if she doesn't want it, but I just thought it was a fun little memorable piece, and it has the fun little drawings that I did for this specific wallpaper. I'm not going to do anything additional to the cakes or the cake stand except wrap them up. I am going to send her my children's book because she is an author and I just think that's fun to share stories. I'm sending a little icing bowl and an extra apron, which she can kind of drape on the stand if she wants. But everything else is going to be wrapped carefully in tissue paper. And I am going to put everything together in one bag because you just can't trust the weather at this moment, at this time of the year. And I want to make sure nothing gets soaked for any reason. So everything is getting put inside of a bag, inside of a box, and will be shipped off to Kate. So now for the big reveal, it's time to see the backdrop. I know what you're all thinking.
Wow.
Okay, I know it's a little bit plain and underwhelming, especially from where it started, but because this is going to be a backdrop on which I'm going to take photos of miniatures, it's pretty important that it stays plain. So I'm going to show you an example of how I might use this, especially with this new piece that I put together from all the miniatures. You do want the background to be somewhat plain so that your focus is on the piece you're taking a photo of. This could have also come in handy in the last video when I was trying to take pictures of Lydia's furniture, but I didn't have a room to put the furniture into. I had to set up this whole foam board contraption so that I had a place to put the paper. But with this, it's super easy to clip up a couple pieces of scrapbook paper, and I already have an automatic floor. In the future, I think I could cover the floor, and so I had different flooring options as well. I'm also thinking this could be a good way to check if a wallpaper is good for your miniatures. Say you do have accessories such as a chair or a painting and you want to see if this is a good color to put in that room. This might be a good way to check it out. So I am going to be putting this up now without feeling bad. Now I'm not going to be able to see this very often, but that's okay because that's not its purpose anymore. It can collect dust and be easily cleaned later. The big project is done, put away. All the different parts of it are now put away in the correct areas. And now I can move on to the smaller project. And I think I mentioned this before, but with this project, I was really enjoying it and really liking it until I put in the spider. And I thought she would grow on me, and I thought I would be like, okay, like it's, you know, it's starting to work on me, because sometimes that happens where initially I don't like a project and then I just live with it for a little bit and it starts to grow on me. It hasn't happened. So this project is different from the other one because I'm just going to start removing the parts of the project that I don't care for until I'm happy with it again. Now, I don't know, I don't think in this video I will make it into anything new, but I will have a shell of a project and a few pieces that I do really enjoy, and when that spark of creativity comes back for this one, then I will have something ready to work with. What's funny about this one is I actually made 2 spiders. I made this spider and then I lost it. I am glad that I am the one that found the spider. It is comically large, so I don't think it'd spook anybody. But now I have 2 spiders, so maybe I can keep both spiders and make some kind of project with the 2 of them that is a bit more cartoony, a bit more, I don't know, less realistic of surroundings, and I feel like that would fit together a little bit better than my incredibly realistic background with a kind of cartoony looking spider. So let's get started taking out some of her miniatures and the spider herself. Thankfully, I never glued in the little vanity seat, but I did glue the spider to the seat, so I'll have to deal with that in a bit. But the first thing I can start taking down are the spider webs. Now, I did work pretty hard on the spider webs, and I learned a lot in this process. I used a mixture of spider serum and spider webs that are like Halloween prop spider webs, and definitely learned a ton about spider webs, but I'm okay with taking these off and just counting that up to an experience. I'm going to be saving all of the spider's accessories and keeping those with her. This little purse was put in with some museum wax, which is so much easier to remove than glue. And I had put in several little pieces with just some sewing pins because I wanted them to look as though they were floating in the spider web. I am taking those out for now. I do like that idea in general, so I might use it again. I'm going to keep all of these pieces together with the spider, so if I do decide to install them somewhere else, I have everything already done. It's all on the sewing pin, ready to go into a new wall. She had one little makeup brush that matched this entire set that was sitting on top of the vanity, so I clipped that off with some flush cutters and added that to the bag as well. Now I can deal with my spider. The spider is needle felted, so I knew this was going to be kind of a hairy situation. I was able to get my flush cutters in between her and the seat, and I just started cutting through the wool fibers. I would rather cut the fibers than cut the chair itself. Because she's needle felted, it won't take very long at all to fix up any damage done to the bottom of her body. So now I have my 2 little spiders. I can put them off to the side. Thankfully, she was put on with hot glue, and whatever finish I used on this vanity and seat made it pretty easy to remove the hot glue, and there's almost no damage to the top of this seat. I can put it back into the diorama and use it again in the future without having to do any repair to the paint, which I'm thankful for because I do think I custom mixed that color. I am so much happier with this. It feels so much better to look at for me, and I'm just trying to figure out what the future of this project might be. I feel like I need a different character, maybe something with like a very long flowing gown. I don't know, maybe a ghost or something like that. I also don't know what I'm going to be doing with the spiders yet, so I'm putting them into the character bin along with the accessories that I collected. If I get really ambitious, maybe I'll just needle felt an entire miniature scene for them. No guarantees. And then I'm going to take my diorama and put that back on the shelf, so whenever I pass by, I can think of ideas that it might become in the future. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a bit of a different video because usually I am constructing things and putting them together. And in this video, I took everything apart. But I do feel a lot more creatively excited, especially about the spider project, because really I didn't have to take much apart. There can be a whole new idea in the background with the vanity, and then there can be a whole new idea with the spiders in some other setting. I'm also excited to use my new backdrop for photographing miniatures in the future. And of course, finally being able to display one of my stoves just covered in mess from the elbow brush bake-off. That one had been hiding in the shadows for just a little bit too long. Let me know down in the comments if you've ever thought about recycling a project, taking a project apart, starting something over. I think it can be a really healthy thing to do. It can kind of free you from these burdens of thinking, oh, I put so much time into this, I have to keep it or I have to display it. Because you can take those things and make something entirely new, which is just continuing your creative journey. I am still working on Lydia's room. I worked on something this past week, so stay tuned for that. This was just kind of a one-off video that was on my mind that I wanted to get done, and I'm so glad it's complete now. Thank you for your continued patience on waiting for videos to come out. I will see you in the next one. Bye. Just kidding. Oh. The camera's still on. There's still spider butt fuzz on my desk. I think I need to clean up a little bit now. Aha! I would say bye with Stormy, but she's at the groomers. If she comes back fluffy, I'll put in a picture for you.
Look at you! You're so fluffy. Except for your face.